Bank, which is probably a company which is based in the UK, has listed these depositories, the ideas in India. They are, as you see, you will see on the stock market codes, you can see a SCB idea being there. Other than that, this has not been a very popular route, but this is a route for foreigners if you have a booming stock market. And again, if the stock markets, there was probably a report I read that the stock market may hit 40,000, and maybe there may be other greedy investors who may want to come in and start issuing investors. Probably they feel that if the Indian markets will become too hot to handle, then maybe in comparison, if foreign companies' receipts maybe probably give a better rate of return on the investment. To then move on to what is called a QFI, or a qualified foreign investor. Now, who is a QFI? As we saw earlier, and that is the reason I made this distinction between an Obama and an Ellen Mitchell. You had the portfolio investment scheme, but the portfolio investment scheme was only available to people like Ellen Mitchell and an OCB set up by him. If a George Bush or an Obama decided to invest into India by saying that probably India will give me better returns than investing in a fixed deposit receipt in the US, then he was not really allowed any particular route unless he came in. He got in, a lot of people came through an FII sub-account and then invested into India. Or, as you see, the FPI, whatever it is, FII. So there was no way by which these people could actually invest into the stock markets. NRIs were allowed, NRIs of Indian origin were allowed, those who were citizens of India, maybe father, grandfather, whatever, they were allowed. But a foreigner per se could not invest. And you know, foreigners have an appetite. In the chapter relating to immovable properties, you will see how a lot of foreigners or Germans have a lot of liking for investment in houses in Goa, for example, or in Kochi, or in Pondicherry. There is a huge amount of appetite for investments in those places. Similarly, there was a demand that now it is time to even broaden the markets and to allow QFIs to come in and invest into India. And the QFIs therefore refer to a much broader category of investors, a foreigner who is neither a citizen of India, has no other economic links with India, a pure foreigner but who wants to invest and earn returns from India. Again, on notification of the SEBI FPI regulations, which I said will come into effect from 1st June 2014, the QFI also will become a category which will be governed within those regulations of AIF. It will become a subcategory of an AIF, and therefore, to that extent, these regulations also will have to be amended or merged even under the FEMA regulations. Like in the case of an NRI scheme, the basic philosophy is the same, that 5% of a company is something that you can invest up to for each individual basis, and as an aggregation, this cannot exceed 10% of the paid-up capital of an Indian company. Important point to note is that this is over and above the FII and NRI. So you can have the FII all put together 24%, you can have an NRI all put together depending on our 10%, and then you can go up to 24% if so decided. And then you can have a QFI which can again go up to 10%. So subject to the sector policy in force, and again QFI is the reporting mechanism and the depository which is now contemplated, which is going to be doing all this reporting to the RBI, will have to keep this track in place that by a combination of all these methods, that the Indian investment in the foreign investment in the Indian company doesn't exceed whatever is contemplated in the FDI scheme as per the industrial policy. So then move on to foreign investments in LLP. I think a reference probably was already made by Shabir in the earlier section, so I don't think I will deal with it at such great length. But I think suffice to say, LLP has emerged as a very attractive option now for foreign investors, and the reasons are not very difficult to know why. Because an LLP, as you know, has, if you have an LLP, and the LLP, as you see, the conditions, an LLP, investment in LLP is permitted in areas where 100% FDI is allowed. And 100% FDI is normally allowed in all services sector and all other sectors, the software, IT enabled, and many other sectors, manufacturing, where there is 100% FDI allowed, you can have an LLP and you can invest into that LLP up to 100% easily. The advantage in the services sector is that if you are dealing with a related enterprise, and for BPO and KPO operations, and if you have a captive R&D center, you will, under Income Tax Act, you will be required to charge on the basis of what is called a cost plus. So based on safe harbor regulations or whatever regulations you may have, you will have a cost plus 17, 18, 20, 23, whatever your tax officer may decide. And today, as you have seen in the papers, Economic Times, they are talking of tax terrorism. And these companies and these entities have always been subject to tax terrorism now for the last 6 or 7 years, because starting from a cost plus 5 they wanted to, they've been asked to sometimes pay up on a cost plus 35, cost plus 40 or whatever tax officer may so choose. And then you may drive home a lot of points to say that why you should charge that high amount. Sorry to digress, coming back to the subject. As a result of this markup, what will happen is that over the years, your cash build-up will keep on increasing, and any attempt to send this money out will entail an additional dividend distribution tax. So when you want to send this money, effectively what will happen, you will have a tax rate to be paid, a DDT to be paid, not sure on whether the DDT will be allowed in the other country as a credit, and therefore your effective tax rate goes to as high as 43%. So form an LLP. In an LLP, once you have the investment made, LLP makes the profits even on a cost plus basis. The share of profit is exempt in the hands of the partner, section 10(2)(a), and therefore this money can go in and you will have a much lower incidence of tax, and that is why LLP has become popular among foreign investors. People were still waiting and watching, saying that is government allowing FDI in LLPs or not. But over the last 2-3 years, there have been cases of LLPs, not too many really, but there have been cases of LLPs where foreign investment has been allowed. There also have been cases which we have dealt with, and not only LLPs, investment in foreign currency foreign investment LLPs has been allowed. Some companies have also been allowed conversion into LLPs, and we have got to the FIPP to say, I am converting this from a company to an LLP, please allow me that, and the FIPP has allowed that as being permissible. So the LLP has thrown up these various combinations and combinations. The LLPs are, as I said, allowed in the 100%, wherever the 100% FDI is allowed. I have given a reference in the Annexure A on what the FDI policy is. Shakil must have already covered it in the earlier session. There are some restrictions on some of those sectors where an LLP investment cannot be made. Investment in LLP cannot be made, which I have put down here. The plantation agricultural print media is very typical. The important point in relation to the LLP, which is now clarified as a result of the RBI notification in March 2013, is this concept of capital of an LLP and a profit share, and how do you value what is the interest in a partnership or of the LLP, what is an interest in the LLP. And until now there was no guidance on, in the case of a company the position was very clear that when a non-resident invested in, you had to at least invest at the DCF value. Anything lesser than that will not be permitted. When you wanted to go out, you had to at least ensure that the value was lower than the DCF value. So the whole idea is to protect the interests of India, that when a person comes into India, you don't give him a share at a value which is lower than the market value, such that he doesn't come in today and ask for the same money to be returned tomorrow by selling the share of the company. So I'll come in at 10 rupees, if the DCF value is 20, I come in at 10, tomorrow I can demand 20 rupees, and therefore 10 rupees you would have immediately benefited. And that's why the logic of putting in DCF when you come into the country, taking any amount, but not more than the DCF. So if you want to be a kind Samaritan and you want to kind of gift it or sell it at a lower price to a resident Indian, that is welcome, but anything above that is clearly not welcome, and that's the logic. And that same logic is built into the FDI in LLP as well. So depending upon your structuring, and it is very important to position what you want to do at times. And that reminds me of a joke, how do you structure things, and how do you, reminds me of a joke of two beggars. Now these two beggars, as they were, these beggars were based in London. And there was a beggar A and a beggar B, and very often as a matter of strategy they used to go and be at different points of time to beg. Probably because in order to increase their earnings as such. And beggar A used to come in, and he used to come in, but whatever his intake of earnings was only reasonably limited. On the other hand, beggar A was surprised to see that beggar A used to come in with a lot of earnings and a lot of 10-pound notes. And soon the man was in a position to acquire a car as well as a mortgage-free house and things like that. And so beggar A was very surprised. He asked beggar B, what is the real strategy? What is it that that you are doing differently than I am, as a result of which you are able to increase your daily earnings? So beggar A said that, let me ask you, what have you said, or what board do you hold, or what placard do you hold when you are begging? The man says, I hold a placard which is intended to appeal to everyone to give me alms, which says that I am a poor man, I have a wife and 4 children to support, please give me some money. Okay? He says, see, this is where my strategy is different. He says, I am holding a placard which says, I only need this extra 10 pounds to return to Pakistan, and people are very happily donating it to me. So it is a question of strategy. How do you actually place yourself in order to, whether an LLP, a company, FSCI and all that, as you saw from time to time. Just like in the case of a company and the transfer of shares, a transfer of shares from a resident to a non-resident, the consideration has to be the fair price. Now this fair price again will throw challenges for a chartered accountant, but it is very typical of government and RBI to do that. They always want to leave all this to a chartered accountant without giving you any guidance. So even on the DCF method there was no guidance, and we came in and we were slapped with all the share capital controversy, the premiums, and having issued at lower values. DCF values were different. Now the tax officer wants to take the best in the DCF value to see that the highest price was charged to a non-resident related party. At times when they don't find that very convenient, then they will go to the NAV value, as we see in the case of Vodafone 3, when which went to the Bombay High Court. Then they took the value as per net asset value and not as per the DCF value. So depending on whatever suits them, they will have that. Therefore the challenge will be here, what they have said is any international methodology, and therefore the institute will have to now come out with some kind of guidance in terms of how to really value the partnership interest in an LLP, because depending on what you invest and when you want to get out or you want to get in, all this is something that is going to be relevant. Reporting, they have now designed a form that reporting has to be within 30 days, and I think also the guidance is that for all the LLP which has flowed in from 2011 till today, you have now to do it within a particular period of time. For disinvestment, like in the case of form TRS, there is something which has to be reported within 60 days. Important point in case of LLP is that a downstream investment, if a company is having LLP, is having foreign investment, it cannot indulge in downstream investment. And if you are having any, if you want to, if you are a company which is which has got foreign investment and you are majority foreign owned, then you can invest downstream into an LLP. But the condition is that entity. So suppose, let's take for example, I have a company A which is already set up in India, which is 100% owned by a foreign company. That company wants to become a partner of an LLP. That is possible provided that company A and the LLP B are operating in sectors which are allowed under the 100% route. And the way the regulation, one regulation says says allowed, and it seems that it's freely allowed. But if you see the other regulation says that whenever you want to make an investment in an LLP, either directly or indirectly, And this would be something which would be indirect, because you have a company in between A, and that company is then taking a downstream investment in the LLP. It would be a form of indirect investment. There they say that you have to go back to the FIPP. And that is why, on a harmonious reading, if a company wants to make this kind of a downstream investment into an LLP, they will have to go back to the FIPP. Then I think we then come towards, as I end, I come towards the end of this particular topic, is an investment in proprietorship and partnership concerns and others. And it is interesting that this doesn't form part of the FEMA transfer or issue of security regulations. This is rather contained in FEMA investment in firm or proprietary concern in India regulations 2000. So to that extent, what I mentioned earlier, there is this particular departure. I mentioned that under FEMA, life has been made easy, that you only have to look at a self-contained regulation and not go any further for looking at other kinds of investment. But this is where I have proved wrong, because if you want to look at investment in a proprietary concern or a firm in India, that's not contained in that regulation, it is rather contained in the FEMA regulations. And the logic for that is the same logic, that this window for investment in a firm in India was opened up way before 1991 for NRIs. So just like NRI investment into a company on a non-repatriation basis, investment into a firm on a non-repatriation basis was opened up much before the FDI route was opened up for foreigners, and hence this is a regulation which has continued to be there since that point of time. Because when they enacted FEMA, they said everything that was contained in FERA will actually only become much better. You can't have any scheme which was available to you which will put you into a worse position, into a far more precarious position. So based on that logic, the logic is that this really continues. So in terms of this particular scheme, the investment in partnership for proprietary scheme, an NRI or a PIO can make an investment by way of a contribution to a firm, both on a non-repatriation basis, not both, only on a non-repatriation basis. Amount can come in from the NRI, it can be come in from an NRI account. If you want to use foreign funds, it can come in from an NRO account. If you have rupee funds and you want to use rupee funds. The conditions are the firm should not be engaged in agricultural plantation activities, which is there all across. Not something in the real estate business, that is only dealing in land and immovable property, or earning income thereon, or the print media sector. Now, why am I highlighting this? Why am I going through this in so much of detail? Because this has often a question which is posed is that because of this, is there a window of opportunity that you may have your NRI client investing into maybe real estate, development and construction, or a retail business or any other business which is not really open up for foreign investors but can be open to a non-resident Indian in terms of this scheme. Because as you see, the scheme only limits 3 or 4 other activities. No other activities are limited, and there is no reference made to the industrial policy. And the FEMA transfer issue of security regulations may have a reference to the industrial policy, but the FEMA proprietary concern regulations 2000 don't have any reference to the policy. So if you were to ask a judge to read it, he will interpret the law as it is, and he'll say the regulation is very clear that you can clearly invest in any sector other than these 4 which have been listed. Point is, yes, non-repatriation basis. The point is you can invest into a particular sector. Your capital becomes non-repatriable. The principal becomes non-repatriable. But all your incomes, as you know and as you have heard over the days, are all current account transactions. So any incomes arising from those investments become freely repatriable. And even if they were to be put in an NRO account, it can again be freely repatriable because of the $1 million route. So an NRI or a PIO may find this attractive to come in to make investment in India through this route is the major point that I wanted to highlight, and that is the reason I have highlighted this investment and partnership firm or proprietary concern. On the other hand, if you want repatriation benefits, The policy is very clear. They say you will have to go to the Reserve Bank of India and take prior permission of the RBI. And there is also the policy, the consolidated policy says in consultation with the government of India. And when you put these two together, it means you are easily set back by a period of 1 year minimum. Because if you have, for those of you who have had an occasion to have a liaison office or a representative office, which is referred by the RBI to the government, it clearly puts you back by 6 months. So you should never be careful before advising your clients by saying a liaison or representative office can be opened in 3 weeks. It also depends upon the sector concerned, because in certain key sectors, and that sector again according to the whims of the government keeps on getting expanded, they may send you back to the Ministry of Finance, and there your files will then lie for 6 months or a year. So that is where you have to be careful here. For repatriation benefits, you want it, you have to be ready for the long haul. But in theory, possible, but possible with permission of RBI in consultation to the RBI. What about other entities? What about investment in other entities? What about trusts, for example? Trusts for a VCF specifically permitted under that particular route. So you have a trust, and normally all VCFs are set as trusts. Maybe because of the Income Tax Act, maybe because of the Trust Act, because the trust, as you know, under the Income Tax Act, sections 161 to 166, acts like a pass-through entity. Whatever is the taxation of the beneficiaries, the representative assesses is ultimately the taxation of the trust. And therefore, at times, you may have a case of your client wanting to set up a structure which is a pass-through structure like a trust. And we had a case when an Australian entity wanted to invest, not in a company, because again, Australia rates of tax are very high and he was not really getting credit. So he was being imposed on the tax in India in the case of a company after the treaty, and then again taxes in Australia, the Australian taxes were much higher. So he wanted a pass-through structure. So he had applied to the FIPB after months together did not reply to it, and then therefore we had to close that particular file. But the reason why I'm saying is that one can look at these structures is because of the pass-through nature of a trust, which would mean that your non-resident beneficiary also will get the same, whatever is his taxation will be the taxation of whatever is that of the trust, and hence as a result of that it may be advantageous.
So suppose there is a case that there is a foreign charitable trust, they want to have a setup of the same activity for charitable trust in India. So how do we go for that?
That is normally processed under the representative office or the branch office route.
But not as a trust.
It is not FDI. So basically you have a non-profit association it wants to set up. So if you look at all the Lions clubs and the IATAs and all those who are charitable trusts outside who are non-profit associations, they come into India through the representative office or the liaison office route. So that was the point on the trust and other entities. For all other entities other than companies and all, whatever has been listed, yes.
So for the purpose of these investments which are made in proprietorship form by an NRI, it will be under this clause only when that NRI is carrying on proprietorship business being outside India. Because the moment he comes to India and he is there in India for the purpose of business, he would qualify to be a resident as per definition of Denmark eventually. So,
yeah, so that's a valid point, but he could be like a sleeping, not a sleeping, but not a very active partner and be in India. So he is carrying on business from India.
For a proprietary concern, it would be like what we understand.
For a proprietary concern, it may be a little bit of a challenge, because if the proprietor himself is here and he is carrying on the business, then clearly there could be an issue of whether. But if he has other businesses outside India, and this is another business in India, then maybe in terms of then that where is his main interest and where is his intention, where to stay, that may decide where he is a resident of.
Then his stay criteria would be analyzed.
Stay criteria would be one factor. I think the more important factor would be the intention. So like you have in the treaty, the tiebreaker type of rule, you may have to look at that. I don't think this has been practically ever tested, just like many other things in RBI, but this could be something which could come out. So in a partnership firm, yes, you could say that I am only taking this investment, I am not very active. It could also lead to maybe other provisions of tax may come into picture, because if you are having your controller management in India, then that entire income of that fellow may get sucked into India as far as this. Of course, this business will be taxable in India, but if he has other businesses and if he is a proprietor, then somebody may say that your entire control, even if a part of the controller management, if it is in India in terms of a partnership business, then you get taxed in India. So those are other ramifications which will have to be looked at. But in terms of some of these sectors where there is no possibility of an FDI coming in, the only point I wanted to highlight is an NRI can look at these sectors for coming into India.
Sir, partnership accept borrowings from the partners. Partnership firm can accept
India?
borrowing in India.
For a non-resident partner or? No, for a non-resident partner, it would have to be processed under whatever is the route possible. There are some borrowing regulations which are allowed, but I'm not sure that a partnership is allowed to borrow from a partner. So you have to take specific permissions for them.
So otherwise, whatever the amount comes, that will be treated as a capital.
Yes. It has to become in capital. You can't do borrowings.
Sir, if the NRI wants to carry out business through proprietary concern, then would he be obliged to set up a branch?
A branch.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Then otherwise, how would he carry out?
So the business will be whatever is the business, A and Co, B and Co, whatever it is. He is not really required to set up a branch and take a permission from the RBI. As others, like the place of business rules say, representative office, branch office, project office, all need to come to the RBI and take registration. Here is not required to take the registration. And what regulation of FEMA is giving him the window to come in and operate really. So you are in a way being blessed by a regulation of FEMA 2 in order to come and do that business. Any other questions?
So under Schedule 4, the NRIs can't make the investments in listed securities.
Yes.
So that way then Schedule 3 and Schedule 4 there is a difference. Because
Schedule 4 looks at private limited companies also, whatever is on the non-repatriation basis is all permitted in Schedule 4. Schedule 3 is looking more at the portfolio investment scheme. That's the real difference between the two. As I said, this proprietary concern and Schedule 4 has origins before liberalization took place. When they allowed NRIs to come into India, first only on a non-repatriation basis. So if they had various schemes like the 24% scheme, 40% scheme, 74% scheme, you can invest on a non-repatriation basis in India, but take the profits also were not allowed. So there were specific sectors. So in order to continue this, Schedule 4 actually blesses what was allowed in the past. Portfolio scheme, Schedule 3, similarly partnership is, in those days it was either investment in a company / investment in a partnership firm or a proprietary business. And I think there used to be a form called Form FIN or something that could be filed in those days. Where DIN was for companies. There was a FIN for partnership firms. So that was the logic. I think with that, these are some of the annexures in relation to the investment procedure, annexures in relation to the sectoral policy, which I think has already been covered in the first part. Second annexure which I had mentioned was the Schedule 5 has the nexus to Schedule 5 and what can FIIs, FPIs, QFIs and NRIs invest in investments other than equity or equity derived instruments. So therefore they are a huge amount of debt instruments. There are as I said, ARC securities, and this more or less is similar, and you will see a similar trend all throughout, and nothing really very significant in terms of policy. It is more a matter of detail, more matter of procedure. You have to look at does this investment qualify, and as I said, this debt keeps on getting regulated from time to time. I think with that. It's already 1:15 and I'm sure a lot of you are more enthusiastic at having a go at lunch rather than listening to me. And I respect that sentiment. As they say, it's always better to leave the audience before the audience leaves you. And before you get too hungry and to start, there is food. There has been enough food for thought. I think it's time you thought of food. And with those words, I leave you. Thank you so much.